Tonight on the Star Trek Universe podcast, we are starting our rewatch of Discovery Season 1. We will be talking about the first two episodes that encompass the opening night premiere. So hang out with us while we talk about these first two episodes. All that right after this. Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Matthew Carroll.
Hey, Matthew Carroll. I'm David C. Robertson.
Hey, David C. Robertson. What is happening?
What's up? Oh, I don't know. I'm just laughing at you.
First thing we're going to do is read a quick summary of these episodes from Memory Alpha. Is that right?
That's right. Memory Alpha. It's fantastic. It's a Star Trek wiki, basically. So, it's got everything you ever want to know, pretty much, about Star Trek.
Sweet.
On there.
Well, read us the summary of these two episodes.
All right. While patrolling Federation space, the USS Shenzhou encounters an object of unknown origin, putting First Officer Michael Burnham to her greatest test yet. Face to face with Klingon vessels, they prepare for the possibility of war if negotiations fail. Amidst the turmoil, Burnham looks back to her Vulcan upbringing for guidance.
Nice. So yeah, that's what this episode's about. Let's talk about it. The first time I watched this episode, I hated it.
I didn't hate it.
I did.
I feel like for myself, there was an adjustment period.
Sure.
Where I just had to be angry at changes that I didn't want there to be.
Right.
And,
yeah, and I think that's part of why I hated it. There's so many changes that didn't make sense to me and all that. But what I was getting at is this time, I really liked it. I really liked it a lot more.
I still thought it was kind of boring.
I found myself really liking it. And so it's just a very different experience. I already knew what was coming, so I wasn't worried about all the little differences, the Klingons, all of that.
Yeah.
This time I just got to kind of sit back and enjoy the character stuff. And I think they actually did some really interesting character stuff in the first two episodes. That's my general review. You want to get into spoilers?
We can get into spoilers. I figure it's been long enough that we shouldn't really even be worried about it. But
sure, but some people out there might just be tuning in who haven't watched it yet. We're going to talk about episode 1, episode 2. Full spoiler alert.
Look, I think this works as a great prologue to the show. I really do feel like episode 3 is the pilot for the show in a lot of ways.
Yeah, me too. I almost my take on this the first few times while the first season was on was I liked the third episode a lot as a pilot, and I almost wish they had just sprinkled episode 1 and 2 throughout the season. Like if I had met Michael Burnham and I just know she's like the traitor that began the war, like that's all I know about her, and then I have to I almost felt like they gave me too much of her character in the first episode instead of kind of letting it out slowly, and it was almost like they had to make me fully understand her character from the beginning, which is a thing that a lot of shows do. But I think these days, a lot of times, the more interesting thing to do is sort of introduce a character and piecemeal out their motivations, you know? And this one kind of just felt like, we're going to give you all of her information. What I liked about it was the fact they showed her at different points in her life. And a lot of what I've talked about it a lot, liking about Star Trek is the emotions versus logic idea.
Yes.
And I think it's really interesting what they do in this first two episodes where they show her as a young person trying to get rid of her emotions and embrace logic, as a slightly older person who has gotten rid of her emotions and has embraced logic. And then Sarek bringing her to Giorgio to sort of unlearn some of that to some degree. And then that puts her at odds with Sarek later in her life, where she's like, you know, my emotions inform my logic. And I love that. That's just a cool arc that they built into this episode that I really didn't see the first time I saw it.
One of the things that kind of bothered me the first time, and I guess it kind of still bothers me, is the fact that it was like they felt like they were leaning so heavily into Takuvma being kind of a villain, and like maybe he is and maybe he isn't, because watching it the second time, I got much less, what I saw was like people who were so willing or so desperate to hold on to their heritage that they were bad, like they were like, MAGA people or Westboro people or something like that.
That was one of the things that bothered me in the first time watching this as well. And we talked about trying not making the straw man argument for things.
Right. But this time I saw a group of people who were trying, and a leader who was trying to retain his cultural heritage, who was trying to keep from other people either appropriating his heritage or his culture, and still going about it in an improper way. But I saw like a different side of it. Is basically what I'm saying. Is like you could look at it and go like, no, he's trying to keep it from being like lost and watered down. Yeah. But one of my biggest problems is that I felt like they may have thought they went too far and made him too much of a villain. So they were trying to like mirror his little flashbacks with Burnham's, and his flashbacks were kind of just, okay, we get it, you were mocked and bad things happened, but I don't care. I think it would have been stronger if they had focused more on Burnham or on something else, like, or maybe even focused on Voke, because he's obviously the one that mattered more overall.
Yeah, that's true.
But you know what this whole thing reminds me of is the Battlestar Galactica miniseries that came before the show.
Yes.
Where it's just like, oh my gosh, can we just get to the story?
Yeah, like give me the people on the run. I don't. This first episode's a little, and pilots are often a little hard to watch because it's like they don't know what the show is yet. They haven't fully figured out what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I think this show definitely suffers from that in this first episode. I still contend this shouldn't have been the first episode. I just wish they'd jumped into the story a little more.
Well, this one was by Brian Fuller and Alex Kurtzman. The teleplay was Brian Fuller and Akiva Goldsman, and we know before this show even came out, Brian Fuller was gone.
Right.
So apparently there were a lot of creative differences. David Mack even said that he's the guy that he wrote the tie-in novel, Desperate Hours, and he says while he was, and I'm on Memory Alpha, I'm not even going to try to cover that, but he said they had not settled on what the pilot episode was going to be, and he had looked, he said they weren't 100% sure where they wanted them to go yet, and when he was writing it, so there was a lot of back and forth, and I think it shows.
Yeah. But lots of cool things happening here. So as I say over and over, I look at Star Trek a lot of times as like the captain having to take in different information from different crew members to make decisions, and it was really strange the kinds of ethics they were sort of balancing in this show. Michael Burnham's on one side, and she's often brash and bold, and then you've got Saru kind of on the other side, and he's always fearful, and that just doesn't seem like a bridge dynamic that is nearly as interesting. And in this show, in this episode, it kind of just came off like Burnham was always sort of right. Mm-hmm. Even though she was trying to do a big, bold thing with the Vulcan Hello. Also, I get frustrated with the show. I get frustrated with the show when they say that it's the war is Burnham's fault.
Uh-huh.
Like, and the fact they act like her mutiny caused the war, and her mutiny did nothing. Like, she never actually fired on them. She does kill Takuvma in the end, which is a deal, but that's not part of her mutiny, you know?
Well, didn't they also put bombs in dead bodies?
Yes, but that's not.
That's pretty messed up.
It is messed up, and this pisses me off so much. This is like the worst sin the show has done. In that episode, they put bombs on dead bodies. And then immediately after the show came out, there were all these articles about how that's very much against the Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
And then... So
who the hell cares?
No, that's the thing. Who the hell cares? It's 300 years later, right?
Right.
3 episodes later... In the show, they mention the Geneva Conventions. Not in reference to the fact that we just broke them as a hero moment, but like in reference to the fact that they can't do that. It's against the Geneva Conventions. Like, what? Like, it's one thing to do something that's against the Geneva Conventions and act like the Geneva Conventions aren't a thing. It's another thing to break them and then 2 episodes later bring them up as if they're still settled law that you still follow.
Right.
That's super bad. Like, that's bad. And it's probably just because they didn't know that, or they knew it and they didn't care. That's the thing that I always worry about. Like, if they didn't know, they don't know. I don't fault the writers for not knowing the Geneva Conventions better. Like, that's not a problem. If you think you came up with a clever way to solve a problem, but like, you came up with a clever way for your heroes to get out of their problem. That's cool, but. I just feel like someone should have caught that little, especially if they air the first episode and that is called out a few episodes later, maybe edit that moment out where they mention the Geneva Conventions.
Yeah, but you know what Burnham, I mean, there was resistance to that idea, and
no, there wasn't. Not on the ship.
Yes, there was.
Ooh, I don't remember any resistance. I don't know.
I thought Saru resisted.
Saru was resisting them fighting at all.
He was resisting everything, but but there was still resistance.
There was not resistance to them using the dead bodies. As soon as
even if there wasn't, that's a Kirk move.
They were planning. Sure, it being a Kirk move doesn't help the fact that it's against the Geneva Conventions, and then they immediately mention
it does for me.
You like Kirk, that's fine. Going against, it's just not good.
It's not. I get what you're saying.
I'm not saying it's horrible. It's just not good. Like, it's kind of a bad little flaw they have in there.
Yeah, I get it. I don't remember who brought up the Geneva Convention. If it was Michael Burnham, I'd be like, oh man.
Yeah.
But if it was somebody like Tilly, I'd be like, oh, okay, she don't know.
Yeah, it's just that you have a whole ship full of people. It's not that, like...
Yeah, but it's a different ship. Like...
Right, but to bring it up a few episodes later means it's still in place, which means if they're if they're in battle, they should have it in mind, you know? I
get it.
It's not good. I don't know. There's almost no way in my mind to fix that little flaw.
I don't know. When someone's, when you're staring down the barrel of a gun, you're not worried about the Geneva Convention.
Right. And
that is what I would say.
It could have been, right. But that should be something that someone brought up. Like, someone should have, like, that Saru could have said, hey, that's completely against the way we fight wars. Like, we are under the Geneva Conventions as the Federation, and we don't do that because we've agreed that's a cruel way to wage war. And someone could say, well, this war, we can win this war, and it's better to win the war and stop the war. It's it's better to win it's better morally because it's a good outcome or whatever. Like, there could have been that conversation, which would have been nice. Like, have a conversation about, like, war crimes and whether they're worth it if the outcome is better. Like, that's a great moment in Star Trek. Have that conversation. But just to ignore it is not good. And I don't think they intentionally ignored it. I think probably what happened is they just didn't realize it was part of the Geneva Conventions. Mm-hmm. But what I fear is they noticed it and said, no one's going to notice that. And then they're like, no, we all noticed that. It's the internet. Right. You can't just say, you can't do that anymore. You can't just do, it's a little flaw. It doesn't, my story doesn't really make sense. Like, if you just, so many problems can be fixed in the writing process. All these, like, canon issues and like flaws of logic can be fixed if you just do a little bit of thinking and care.
For real, you don't even need the internet. What you need is Rick Berman and Brandon Braga just kind of sitting in the room, not contributing creatively, but they need to be there so that when one of the writers say, they won't notice, they can just be there to go, they will.
It was like, they always notice.
Pre-internet, they did an episode of TNG where they fired torpedoes out of, like, no, it was a phaser out of the torpedo bay. It was just a weird little thing. They accidentally had that in VFX, and then, like, Rick Berman was like, no one will notice. And they got letters and letters.
I love our,
like,
I love
what
our
the
people.
hell?
I love our people so much. It's like, I don't know what culture I'm from. I really don't. I'm a mutt. I'm like a whatever, like a European mutt of some sort. Don't know what culture I hail from. But, like, I just consider those my people.
I'm pretty sure I'm a European mutt as well, but my middle name is Carlos, so I like to think I have an honorary status. Yeah. My middle name's Scott. It doesn't afford me anything. No, it's like honorary status among the Scotsmen.
Yeah. Ooh,
I could call you Scotty.
You could call me Scotty. Maybe I should be Scotty Carroll on this podcast.
I kind of like it.
I don't mind it. So, anything else about this first two episodes you want to talk about? I know we really haven't dug into the storyline very much. One of the things that scared me about this episode is how little, the first time I watched it, was how little substance it seemed to have. That whole, like, radiation, like, flying through space thing they did, that just was like, I felt like it was just there to give some adrenaline-fueled scene.
Okay.
It just kind of felt like that they were doing that a little bit with this episode, just like including some. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of that going on, and less substance. It seems. And on the second watch, I think there was more substance than I gave it credit for the first time. But I still feel like they're doing the kind of the 2009 Star Trek thing of just like, it's all Star Trek, but we sword fight, you know. Mm-hmm. Let's give Sulu, because he had a sword in one scene in the original series. Let's give him a lightsaber type thing.
Yeah.
So this episode kind of reeked of that. It's like, let's make them fly through space in a suit, we've never seen anyone really like go quickly through space with like a thruster backpack.
I mean, Star Trek the Motion Picture we did.
Well, he's going very slowly. He's not going fast.
No, he went really, really super fast for a while, like with a thruster, like into the mouth of V'ger, and then he like ejected that, and then he like he slowly floated, but he did. He flew really fast.
Well, I may be wrong. I just remember that scene being the slowest. I just remember that scene being the slowest scene, so I did not recall it having a fast beginning.
That's the scene where he sees the machine homeworld.
Yes, I know. Which, for those of you who have read a lot of
The
Return by William Shatner,
and Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens.
Yeah. We'll know that machine homeworld was the Borg homeworld. Not canon, but I like it.
Yeah, me too. It's canon in my heart.
All right. Well, I don't have a whole lot more to say about this, except I liked it a lot more this time. I liked the characters.
I I felt the same. Okay, it's hard to say that I felt the same. Giorgio was awful the first time I saw her. Like, I thought she was really stilted and really wooden. But knowing what comes later with the actress and how she portrays things later on in the story, I would say it makes it a little better for me. It makes it seem like it was a little more intentional what she was doing in the first episodes, and really creating an unspoiled dichotomy, I'll say. Right.
It did make all the difference for me to the weight of their relationship. For me, the Giorgio and Burnham relationship didn't mean anything to me the first time I watched this, but this time on a rewatch, I really got the sense that like Giorgio had really been an important part of her growth as a person. Mm-hmm. Her understanding her humanity was a result of her relationship with Giorgio, and I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
It made the way she feels about Giorgio going forward, the way it just makes the guilt she feels over the situation, like it all makes a lot more sense to me now. So I'm excited to see the rest of these episodes and see with the context that I have now, how I feel about these shows.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really like made me feel like Burnham, like really made me start to see like the parallels between Burnham and Kirk, was like the line where she says, "Do you want to know how I turned on you? I believed saving you and the crew was more important than Starfleet's principles. Was it logical, emotional? I don't know." I loved that. That just reminded me of Star Trek 3.
Yeah, I did like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
And I feel bad because I feel like I'm turning my back on old Star Trek to some degree, and maybe becoming a dumbed down version of myself, which is admittedly hard to do. But
stuff, you've been working on that for a long time.
I know. Stuff like I feel like I'm of two minds. Like stuff like her being in the brig and like everything being destroyed except for like a little segment of the brig, and her just being like held in place by a force field.
Right.
I feel like that is at once a dumb Michael Bay 12-year-old wrote this type of thing to do, but I loved it.
Hey, I will
you know what I mean?
I will never fault Star Trek for doing fun things. And I thought that scene was fun. They made it all make sense. Like it could happen. That scene could happen. It's not, I don't mind them adding fun things in as long as there's like substance behind it. And I felt like that scene had a lot of substance.
Mm-hmm. I don't understand how she would be able to hack the ship's computer from sick bay. I mean, not sick bay, the brig. But
well,
whatever.
She didn't hack it. She convinced it.
Yeah, she messed. Yeah, I mean, but it was sort of a philosophical logic hack.
Right. No, I loved it. I loved that. I loved that she could use logic to convince the computer that it was wrong for not letting her out, and then gave the computer a creative idea, and that fit her creative idea, because it's a computer. It didn't have the creativity to come up with the idea to shoot her across that space, and so she had to be creative. And then her creativity was more in line with the ethical standards of the computer than the computer's less creative idea. Like, it almost gives humanity a purpose among the stars, because...
Oh, absolutely.
AI is not yet at a place where it has the creativity of Michael Burnham, and that's kind of a cool thing. There's some really cool stuff in this episode.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a very Star Trek thing to do. It was a very iMud thing to do. iMud is like this from the original series. They're kidnapped by a bunch of androids, and they basically defeat the androids by like reciting nonsensical poetry. I believe Spock says something akin to "Logic is a pretty flower which smells bad," and the androids' heads blow up.
Later spoofed by Austin Powers.
Yes, kind of.
Totally.
Except he destroyed those androids with his mojo, baby.
That's right.
Yeah. By the way, have you seen those great Dr. Evil bits on the Tonight Show lately?
No.
No, they're fantastic.
I'll have to watch them.
Yeah, I'll send you links.
Please do. Well, guys, I think that's about all for tonight. We're going to definitely dig into the series some more over the next coming weeks leading up to Season 2. So stick with us. Live long and prosper. To reach out to us, hit us up at StarTrekUcast.com, at StarTrekUcast on Twitter, Star Trek Universe Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for us there, or send us a message at StarTrekUcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv. And if you want to hear more from Matthew Carroll, that's me, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, or go listen to my music at MatthewCarrollmusic.com or anywhere you get music.